Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 81. I am your host, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan. If he can't do it, nobody can. Although there's lots of imposters nowadays. And this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, romance, and other fun stuff about wooden boats all over the world. Welcome to the podcast today, folks. Great to have you on board. Hope you're having fun, whatever you're doing today. I'm having fun because I'm talking about wooden boats. Today's featured segment is an interview with Scott Jones of the NW Maritime Center in Port Townsend, Washington. Scott is the boat manager there. I interviewed Scott about 2 weeks ago while I was visiting the SCAMP Camp, and we had a great conversation about the SCAMP Camp, about what's happening at the NW Maritime Center, some of the projects they're working on, and some other fun wooden boat stuff, so please stick around for the interview. Well, this is a podcast about getting in the game. If you don't know by now, you need to get in the wooden boat game. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. One way is to listen to this podcast every week. Subscribe to it on iTunes. Read the blog, look at the pictures at hookedonwoodenboats.com. Pick up a wooden boat magazine, go to a wooden boat festival, build a wooden boat, buy a wooden boat, rent a wooden boat, row a wooden boat, or just go to your local lumber yard. Pick out several pieces of wood, take them home, and, kind of lay them together on your carpet and see if you can create the shape of a boat and visualize a boat. Just do something with wood, folks. It's really cool stuff. Wooden boats have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The tradition is still alive, and we're promoting that here on Hooked on Wooden Boats, so get in the game. Wooden Boat Hack of the Week, number 19. I'm going to give you a few varnishing tips and tricks. Now, first of all, I want to point out that I'm not an expert at varnishing, although if you go to my website, hookedonwoodenboats.com, and you go to the tab that says My Boats, there is a canoe on there. It's not a canoe, it's a kayak. It's kind of an open kayak called a Mill Creek, and I varnished the deck of that boat with probably 8 to 10 coats, and it came out really nice. Part of it was Brunzeal mahogany, so it's a very deep, but that was probably the best varnish job I've ever done. So anyway, here's a few tips and tricks to keep in mind when you're varnishing your boat. First of all, you want to pick out a good quality varnish. Captain's makes good varnish, Captain Spar varnish, and I think they have a Z Spar varnish also. Interlux makes a good varnish. Epiphanes makes a good varnish. Make sure they are marine varnishes, though. Don't go to your local hardware store and buy some off-the-shelf varnish. It may not be exactly what you need, because you're going to need something with UV inhibitors and that sort of thing. Secondly, once you purchase the varnish, you want to carefully open the can and you want to stir gently the varnish before you use it with a very clean stir stick. Whatever you do, don't take the can and shake it. You'll create a froth that will take days, if not months, to go away and will make a big mess. Once you've gently stirred the varnish with a stir stick, then gently pour it into a smooth plastic container and work from the container, not from the can. It's just a cleaner way to do things. Next thing is you want to properly prepare the surface. So in my case, I'm getting ready to varnish my canoe. Ha ha ha. I've been saying that for 3 months now? I am getting closer, I think. So on my canoe, I'm going to be varnishing over 3 coats of epoxy, marine epoxy. The way I'm going to prepare that is sand it with 220 paper and then 120. I'm sorry, let's do that the other way. I'm going to sand it with 120 very lightly and then 220. And then I'm going to wipe it down with a clean cloth. And then after that, I'm going to wipe it down with lacquer thinner to get the surface, all the contaminants off of it. Then once I do that, I'm going to take the varnish that I've poured in a clean plastic container after I've stirred it, and I'm actually going to apply it with a foam brush. Yeah, you can buy varnish brushes and do it that way, but foam brushes I think are easier to work with. They're disposable. You don't have to mess around with cleaning them. They're not that expensive. So I'm going to apply it probably with the 3 to 4 inch foam brush, and I'm going to apply strokes about 18 inches long, about 4 to 5 strokes wide, going in one direction. And then I'm going to take the foam brush and go across at 90 degrees those 4 to 5 strokes that I've put on the boat. And then I'm going to move on to the next area and try to keep the leading edge of the varnish wet. Now, you want to be sure and do this in a very clean, dust-free area, because if there's any dust at all in the room, it will get into the varnish and it will look like bubbles, but it is not bubbles. It is sand. Not sand. It is dust that's contaminating your varnish. So do it in a clean area. One tip that you can do is to wet the floor of your shop. If you have a concrete floor, you can wet it down, so that'll keep things on the floor from stirring dust into the air. But what I recommend is you just clean up everything really good and then actually maybe wait a day for everything to settle and then apply your varnish. So after the first coat, you're going to let it dry overnight, and you're going to want to follow the recommended temperatures on the can. What are the manufacturers recommending for the application temperature? Let it dry overnight. Wet sand it with 400 grit wet dry sandpaper, which you can find at your local hardware store. And wet sanding is just much more efficient and I think does a much better job than dry sanding. And with 400 paper, it's very, very fine grit, so you're not taking hardly off any varnish. You're just making it a little bit smooth for the next coat. So you go ahead and put your next coat on the same way, and you're probably going to need a minimum of 3 coats to protect the wood on your boat. And you can apply as many as 7 or 8 coats to build the varnish up and have a very deep looking finish. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. Those are the tips that I'm going to be following when I start varnishing my boat here soon. If you have questions about that, email me, dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. I would like to give a shout out to the new subscribers this week to my monthly e-newsletter: Doug Husted, Dennis Casey, Kevin Large, James Van Slot, and Edward Van Breeden. Thank you, gentlemen, for signing up for the e-newsletter, which I send out monthly. And if you're not subscribed, you need to get on board, folks. It's another way to get in the game is subscribe to my e-newsletter. If you go to hookedonwoodenboats/subscribe, give me your first and last name and your email address and send a large cash donation. No, I'm just kidding on that. No donation required. I'll put you on the list and you'll get my monthly newsletter. So please do that if you haven't already done so. So this is a little bit longer introduction than normal, but I've got some really fun stuff to share. So this week, I'm actually sitting in my car in front of Starbucks, so you may hear motorcycles driving by or something. This is my home away from home studio, which actually works very well. So my wife and I have some friends that live pretty near to us, Brian and Nancy Hansen, and they have 4 kids, Kate, Claire, Ian, and Anna, really great kids. And so we saw them this weekend. They came and visited us. because we moved and they wanted to see our place. And so we hung out. And so their 10-year-old daughter, Kate, came up to me. And I know that their family actually listens to my podcasts. And these kids are being homeschooled. And they love hearing about this boat stuff, which is really cool. So Kate comes up to me and says, Dan, you know that boat you were talking about that got torn apart on one of your podcasts? We saw parts of that down at the museum in Seattle. And I'm like, really, the Wawona? Yeah, the Wawona. Yeah, you talked about that on the podcast. And then she went on to describe how the pieces, some certain pieces of the Wawona were actually salvaged and made into different things inside the Museum of History and Industry in Seattle, Washington. So anyway, that was really cool that 10-year-old kids listening to my podcast and learning something about history of maritime history here in Seattle. Pretty sweet. So anyway, if Kate, Claire, Ian, and Anna are listening, hey, keep up the good work, guys. Love you, and I hope you're having a great day. And also, for the other listeners out there, if you want to hear more about the Wawona, which was an 1897 three-masted 165-foot schooner that was taken apart a few years ago, you can go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/069. I have an announcement this week. My good friend Jay Smith with Aspoya Boats in, where is he? He's in Anacortes, Washington. He's putting on a couple workshops. These are one-day workshops, April 13th and April 20th in Anacortes. And he's going to teach Nordic lap straight construction. Cost of the class is $140. It's from 8 to 5 and includes lunch. If you'll recall, Jay is building a Viking ship. If you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/007, you can listen to the interview I did with Jay back in 2011 about his background and his boat building experience. Jay's a very experienced Nordic boat builder. He actually lived and studied boat building, apprenticed in Norway for quite a few years. So anyway, this would be a great workshop if you want to learn about lap straight construction or clinker construction, if you will. Check it out. Let's see here. I was going to give you a phone number or something. Hang on here. So if you'd like to get a hold of Jay, get more information, you can call him at 360-293-2034. Let's say that again, 360-293-2034. Or you can email him at Aspoya Boats, which is ASPOYA Boats at Hughes, HUGHES.net. Again, that's in Anacortes, Washington. I will put the email address and the phone number in the show notes today. So check it out if you get a chance. Okay, we're going to move on to the interview with Scott Jones now from Northwest Maritime Center. Scott, take it away. It is March 15th, 2013. I'm sitting with Scott Jones, manager of the boat shop at the Northwest Maritime Center. Scott, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Dan.
It's been a few months since we did an interview, but we're here at the SCAMP Camp 2013. I think this is camp number 3, is that right?
This is number 3, yeah. One of 2 in 2013.
Okay, yeah, there's one coming up in August too.
Yeah.
So how's the camp going, Scott?
It's going really well.
Yeah.
We've had actually fewer boats than in first camp, and in some regard that's been easier to manage. The pace has been a little less hurried and frantic, maybe. You could say the first one we were hitting the ground running, or trying to.
Yeah.
And I think we did, and a lot of the credit goes to the people that were in the camp. It was
that was 10 people?
Yeah, it was
10
as
boats?
10 boats. Something more along the lines of 13 people all told, 13, 14. So space was cramped, to say the least. But previously we'd only built one of these, really. I had built one, and John had designed one, and Howard had sailed one, and Jason had seen one. So going from 1 to 10 was a big jump, and we learned a lot and took good notes.
Yeah.
And so Camp 2 in October that Howard did in Michigan. They then implemented some of the things we learned, and then he took better notes, and then we learned more. So our process, I think, is more refined, and that helped build in efficiency. So I'd say our quality is up.
Yeah. So percentage-wise, how complete will these boats be built? Just a rough estimate.
Rough estimate of grand total of scope of work. You're probably still only 40% of the way.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Man, Scott.
But 40% in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's true.
Is a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot of boat to do in a kit class form.
So maybe you should have a camp to do the other 60%.
Well, there are other camps that the school has. Well, there's one other camp that they've offered, and I think there's talk of possibly others, and that's mast camp.
Oh, right, I remember that.
And so that was just a weekend commitment, and I don't know if Bruce and the school are planning on doing that again or not, but it went really well. It was, I think, 5 masts, the main mast, and then the boom and spar, or boom and yard were both built also. So it was a hollow mast, and then shaping your...
Bird's mouth construction?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so that's I think it was a 3-day operation, so it's a long weekend.
Yeah.
So they were doing that, and there is some talk of maybe doing some others, turning it into it's full thing,
Yeah. So SCAMP Camp Part 2.
Yeah. Sean at the Rankins of the boat school is interested in maybe doing a sail making class.
Oh.
Josh built his sail for the first one with Josh, the owner of SCAMP 1, built his sail with Sean Rankins teaching him. And so Josh has then gone on and found a supplier for production SCAMP sails. But it seems to be people that are in this camp are not necessarily... There certainly are some that just want to have the keys to a boat and go off.
Yeah.
But most would prefer to be involved in every aspect, or most aspects.
Yeah.
And the making of a sail is, I think, kind of a neat one.
Now, there is somebody, though, that you can buy a completed sail from for the SCAMP? Is that right?
Well, I think there's going to be an aftermarket aluminum mast available. And
the
probably,
A word.
Yeah. And I'm actually building a couple masts for guys personally,
Oh, really?
outside of work.
Okay.
And I have done that for... I guess I built the first one, and then for Dan Fee down in... I don't remember what part of Fort Bragg, California. He's since gone on and sold his SCAMP to another guy in Florida.
Really?
But yeah, I don't think that there's going to be
I was thinking there was a production wooden mast somebody was doing.
Not yet, at least.
Okay.
Anybody out there listening? I think the market's right for it.
And how about the sail?
The sail, I don't remember who it was that Josh contacted to do the sails, but he has. If you contact Josh through, they've got a SCAMP pattern and.
Yeah.
They knock them out. But, yeah.
Cool. So what else has happened at the Maritime Center and the boat shop lately,
man.
Scott? What have you guys been up to?
Too much.
Really?
It's busy, for sure. We're well into our fleet boat maintenance, so we have six fleet boats that we teach people to sail out of. 2 Thunderbirds, so 26-foot hard chine sailboats.
Yeah.
Dorjan, which is a 100-plus-year-old surf rescue boat. And then we have 2 long boats, 26-foot open row-in sailboats. And I think, was that 5?
That was 5.
And Martha J. She's a Pulsifer Hampton, kind of lobster boatish, open, real pleasure crafty. You see it back on the East Coast. Going out and having martinis or something.
Yeah.
But it's a lovely little boat. And so we're well into that. We've got a T-Bird just waiting to come into the shop. It's at the end of the shop, just waiting for SCAMP Camp to end so that Matthew here is walking by us at the moment. It's good radio. I talk about a person I can see. We'll jump in on that. And so I think we're halfway through our fleet maintenance, and then we have class after class after class. We just had a Cape Falcon kayak class.
Oh, you did? I missed it.
Which is a skin-on-frame kayak class. It's a really neat one because, unlike SCAMP and unlike most stitch and glue boat construction, you leave a partially completed boat. It may be structurally sound, but there's still a lot of work to be done. Even in the pygmy boat classes, or you're well on your way. You still have finish work to do at the very least. With the Cape Falcon kayak, your boat's, you're done.
Really?
You launch it.
At the end of 2 weeks?
At the end of 2 weeks. It's just a different style of construction. It lends itself to being done quick and complete.
How many students were in that class?
There were 5, and there was a 6th boat built by the owner of the company. But there were 6 boats. It was amazing. We've already had one pygmy class this year. John and Seth came in and did a class. We've got classes coming up through Chesapeake Lightcraft as well. We have 12, I think, classes
this year.
And I'm never quite sure if class is the right term. Workshop. It's a build your own boat.
Yeah, right.
Workshop. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. 12 of them throughout the year, and probably a couple more scheduled at the end of the year. Between these kind of Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building, Pygmy Boats, Chesapeake Lightcraft, and Cape Falcon Kayak. Between all those, we have 12 of these classes.
Yeah.
So on average, one a month.
Yeah.
And some months.
Wow, so you're a busy guy.
March was overbooked.
Yeah.
So we had about a day to turn around between Cape Falcon Kayak and then SCAMP. And thanks to Matthew and some volunteer help, it happened.
Really?
And, we're on day, really, I guess it's day 12 of SCAMP Camp. Because most of them worked over the weekend.
Did they work the weekend?
They did, yeah.
You were sick earlier this week, too.
I was, and thanks
out of
to
commission for a day or so.
Thanks to 3 actually.
Really?
Unusual for me. I'm usually really healthy, but I have a young daughter, nearly 2-year-old, and I missed Wednesday of last week and then Tuesday, Wednesday of this week, and thanks to Howard Rice, thanks to Jason Bledsoe and Matthew Strawn Morris that work in the shop, and others, Simeon and Lloyd helped out a lot too. Picked up the slack for me not being there. It was good that I wasn't there. I would have infected everybody. I was pretty laid up.
Pretty bad, huh?
Yeah, all of us, my wife and myself and my daughter. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're better.
So the fleet boats that are here, do they come out of the water for the winter?
No,
they stay in the water?
Yeah, they stay in the water.
Yeah.
Risa has been out of the water for a little while. The Thunderbird, just because of space, juggling 6 spaces for actually presently 7 boats that should be in the water, and just waiting for our window of time when it can come into the shop.
Yeah. So what's the next class coming up?
The next class is it's a pygmy class, pygmy boats. Yeah, so it'll be a variety of kayaks. Most in the 16
Is that in
range.
April?
It is. Yeah, we start prepping for it Monday of next week. So that's what today's the 15th, 16th, 17th, Monday the 18th. So it's the end of March. It's the March 25th. Is day 1 of the class.
Yeah.
And the new news for me is that I'm going to be teaching these classes for Pygmy and for Chesapeake Lightcraft.
Oh, you are?
I am. Yeah, this is a new development. And
really? Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So it'll mean I'm busier, which is a good thing. But I really like these classes. They're
maybe you could hire me part-time.
Yeah, maybe.
To help.
Yeah. Look me up. But I really like the classes. You especially with SCAMP, because you it's 2 weeks and you're side by side with these other folks for 2 weeks. You really develop a friendship, and people go out to dinners. And from Camp 1, if you talk to Derek and Dale and Keith and others, they were thick as thieves, and they do their own camps.
Really?
Yeah, they will show up at each other's houses and spend a weekend, helping the other out on their boats.
Really?
But you really develop a camaraderie. Not everybody does.
Yeah.
Everybody's different, and there's room for that in every class. But I really like the classes. I used to coach sports, coach soccer, and I think there's a certain amount of that sort of relationship you develop, even in a week. Where it's, I'm not really these are people that are my senior by 30, 40 years, some of them.
Yeah.
So it's not a seniority thing. It's just a my familiarity with the process and leading them through it.
Right.
We really develop a good relationship.
So will people from those companies be assisting you, or you have your own assistants, or how will that work?
Most of it's going to be on our end. I may be competent and capable of building these boats, but I have not built specifically a Pinguino or a Nor'easter Dory.
Right.
So they'll come out, and this next week with John and Seth from Pygmy, they'll be showing me their process for gluing up their planks. They do a butt joint. I'm used to either scarves or a puzzle joint.
Right.
And so we'll be doing that in the shop next week, and then I will build a boat along with them during the class, and that'll be my introduction / training. And then if we determine that I'm not ready, which certainly is possible, but I expect I will be, I'll be doing the next class.
Yeah.
And then I will undoubtedly involve my assistant in the shop, Matthew, in that process. If not in at least the glue up, then part of the
Wait a minute,
class.
I thought I was your assistant.
Yeah. That's right. You're building one at home, right? Aren't you? What are you building?
Well, I've got the plans rolled up in my. I've got SCAMP Plan 201, but I'm gonna try to buy the kit
201.
this year. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that something?
I wonder what Josh is at right now. As far as total number of plans sold.
Got to be maybe 210 or something.
It must be.
Yeah.
Not bad for a almost
years.
3-year-old.
Almost 3 years, yeah.
See, it's been around. It started in Festival of 2010.
Okay. Yeah, 2.5 years.
Maybe it was 11. 2011, 11, 12, 13. No, it was 2010.
Was it 10?
I think it was 2000 because we started it.
It was at 2010?
Yeah, we were actually
Finished
just right in.
was?
No, it wasn't. We started building it actually as part of.
It was at the 2011 festival.
Yeah.
First boat. Yeah.
It was that was a process because Case at the time, who ran the shop, he was familiar with the boats because he and Brandon Davis at Turn Point Designs had taken it from the initial design and developed it into a kit, and Brandon digitized it. And so Case had been involved in that process with Brandon. So he knew what all the parts looked like. And Case shows up in his truck one day, and we go out and unload 75 pieces of plywood cut into the unusual shapes that some of them maybe look like planks and some of them maybe look like bulkheads. But Sarah and I had no idea what the heck we were doing. And so we're sitting there trying to make sense of all this while,
goodness.
thousands of people walk through the shop and like, what are you guys doing? Well, we're figuring out a puzzle.
Interesting.
But yeah, so that was at Festival of, it must be 2010.
Yeah.
And then it was completed in a couple months, and it was ready. It was in 2011, and it was in 2012. And so this will be it'll be its fourth festival this upcoming year. Third as a completed boat.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, I think she's in the marina actually.
Yeah, I saw her over there.
Yeah. These
Josh
SCAMP
take
camps.
her out once in a while?
Yeah, he and Simeon head out fairly often.
Yeah.
Simeon's always trying to get him to get out in the water, and Josh is busy, with the magazine and
family and everything.
Kit production. All that. Yeah, family.
So are the pre-cut kits, are they coming out really good, Scott?
Yeah, they are actually. We thought we found a problem in Camp 3 here. And as it turns out, it was, I think, more of a human-induced error related to, I don't want to make myself sound more important than I really am, but it was on a day that I missed. No, the kits are pretty much phenomenal. When you go to, so there's so much faith built in that, not much, you have to have so much faith in the kit when you're putting it together, because you're just plugging things into tabs and gluing them up and trusting reference lines and assuming that when you go to hang a plank that it fits, and it fits fair, and then the next plank fits snug up on it, because it's a glued lap boat.
Yeah.
It's not like a butt joint. There is a butt joint. That's the garboard to the bottom. That's a butt joint.
With a sliding bevel on each plank.
And the top of that garboard, then you've got a rolling bevel the full length. Yeah. And then the top of the next, you've got a full bevel, rolling bevel the whole length. And if things don't jive, if you're out, that won't come together, right? Mm-hmm. And there's one boat that came a little funny, and so that must means that we set up one of the, it's minimal funny.
Yeah.
All things relative.
Right.
But they just, it just snaps right. It's, you get your wet out on your lap, and you put your thickened epoxy in there, and you start wrapping it around. And, unless you wrap it around and miss your points, it goes right on. It's
so somewhere
amazing.
I saw people doing fillets. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah.
Fillets.
I always wanted to say fillet, but that's not right. John
I'd
Wellsford.
like a fillet for dinner.
Yeah. John Wellsford, and I think I don't know if this is specific to New Zealand or if this is in Europe as well, but he calls it a cove.
Oh, cove? Really?
Cove, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So I saw somebody doing fillets.
Yeah.
They put the fillet in as smooth as they could. Then they put clear packaging tape over it and smoothed it down and left the tape on it. So have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard
done?
of somebody doing something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would do it, but
Okay.
there are other ways to do it without introducing the tape, I think.
Yeah. Well, what would you suggest to get a real smooth fillet?
Well, if you lay in your fillet and then you give it a little bit of time and it'll get to set, it'll set up, but it's not fully hard. You can come back over that with denatured alcohol and your thumb with a glove, or a denatured alcohol and a rag.
Nice.
And you can really just
Smooth it out.
Yeah, if you
Okay.
take a look at some in there that they did that, it makes a world of difference.
Why didn't you tell me that like 8 months ago before I built my canoe?
You can put peel ply over like a glassed in over fillets.
Peel ply?
Yeah, it's a fabric that you can lay over the top of it. It allows you to kind of fare off. So if you have glass tape, for instance, and you want to be able to fill the weave, or you want to be able to fare that edge, because glass tape with the sewn edge can lift up a little bit.
Yeah.
You can cover it. So you can peel right off after the fact.
Okay.
Leaves a more finished product.
Okay.
But
So there's one tip for our listeners. Give me another wooden boat building tip.
on the spot.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be anything fancy.
Okay, well, the tip that I always tell when we're doing these classes, and it's related to epoxy specifically, is rule number one of epoxy work is before you mix up your epoxy, is go to the bathroom. Because your clock's ticking. Once you start that cup mixing, you gotta go. You gotta go.
Okay.
You don't want to cook enough.
So what's tip number 2?
That one wasn't good enough.
Need one more.
Start from a good firm structure, whether you're building SCAMP or any other boat. Some boats you build free form. So if you have a strong back underneath your boat, or if you have a jig that you're building on top of, make sure that you know that it's true, it's level, it's plumb, so that everything else that you do off of that, you believe you can trust a level. Because there are times when you want to use
What
that.
about a tip for
lead me to
epoxy coating your boat?
Well,
you
I
want to end up with 3 coats of epoxy?
Three is my standard, and I think kind of standard.
Give me a couple tips for doing that, because I don't like doing that.
Yeah, well, coating in particular, I had an email about this topic just the other day. A guy lives in Mississippi, and he, unlike us here, gets sun. Although it is actually wanting to break out as we're speaking. And he coated some panels in the morning, and then as the day warmed up, the plywood off-gassed through the epoxy, and you can actually make kind of epoxy foam on the top of your plywood, or whatever it is you're coating. So in general, you like to coat as the temperature is going to fall.
Okay.
So end of the day is a nice time to coat.
Yeah.
So that's a good one.
Okay.
Keep it out of the sun.
Yeah.
In general, so that you have less of that. Coating.
What about...
I'd say when you're gluing up, a good tip in particular for using plywood, as a rule, I do a wet out of unthickened epoxy before then you put your glue in of thickened epoxy with silica or fibers or whatever, particularly on end grain plywood or end grain solid wood.
Yeah. Okay.
Almost a steadfast rule.
What about I can't think of what you call it now, the white film that will form sometimes?
Amine blush?
Yeah, the blush. How do you handle blush?
Well, if you get amine blush, that's a warm water and a scuffing pad, a scour pad.
Do you do that between coats when you're... Okay.
We actually, in this warmer, our shop environment is stable. I'm far from an epoxy scientist, but I'm sure there are people that call themselves that. As I understand it, it's a function of amount of time curing in relation to the ambient humidity and temperature.
Okay.
The longer it takes to cure, the more likely you are to build up amine blush. Somebody's going to call in and correct me.
Yeah.
I generally, what I do tends to avoid it. Or you can use some epoxies that are amine blush free. I don't know that I really trust that 100% either, but
yeah,
those are more ones for coating, like silver tip for System 3, or I think Moss is across the board, I think, is blush free, but I've never used Moss, MAS. The West System, they have special hardener 207. That's amine blush free. It's less made. It's less made for. I've got epoxy on my chin.
That's not a good thing.
No,
Scott.
it's not. Maybe it's not epoxy. Anyway, 207. It's a special hardener. It's amine blush free. But it's warm water and scouring pad.
I'll put in a legal disclaimer at the end of the podcast, so I'll be held liable for any of these tips.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And work clean.
Okay.
It's real easy to get, as I think I have some epoxy on my chin. I can't imagine that happened. But work clean, keep it off you.
Yeah.
Keep it off your tools.
Okay. Cool.
A lot easier to remove wet epoxy than it is to sand or chip away hardened epoxy that doesn't. Keep it off your clamps.
Especially when it's harder than the wood you're working with.
Yeah.
Then you cause problems when you sand. Right?
Get a valley all around.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I appreciate your time today, Scott. It's great to hook up again. Anything else you'd like to say to our listeners?
Welcome the sun.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, and the shop is always open here at the Maritime Center. Yeah. By all means, come on by.
And the website address?
NWMaritime.org. And we also have a pretty neat thing is our webcam on that page. You can take a look at what's going on in the shop. I think that's pretty neat. It's on our main homepage on the top right, I think, or at the boat shop. We've got a list of all of our shop classes, all the classes that I mentioned. All the registration is done through the other companies, the Chesapeake Lightcraft or Pygmy or the Boat School, the Cape Falcon Kayak. But we have a list of all of them and I think links to their websites.
Very cool.
And also go out and check out the Boat School. Always a fun place to come visit, in my opinion. Port Hadlock.
Yeah.
Neat place. I think they just put the deck on sliver last week.
Oh,
That's 60-foot day sailor. Yeah. 60-foot day sailor.
Wow.
Yeah, I said that. No, I meant it. And just some amazing things going on. People getting trained to do a new profession. It's a neat place.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Scott. Have a good one.
Thank you, Dan.
Talk to you later.
Yeah, thanks for coming by.
Scott, thanks for taking time to do the interview. It's always fun to chat and see what you guys are up to. You've got some awesome projects going on there at the Northwest Maritime Center, so keep up the good work. If you'd like to connect with me, please do so via email, dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. Subscribe to my e-newsletter. Leave a comment on my website. Find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Pinterest. You can call my voicemail feedback hotline 424-261-2360 or subscribe to the podcast in iTunes. Hope you're having a great week. Get in the wooden boat game if you're not already in. If you need some ideas on how to do that, shoot me an email or call me on the voicemail feedback hotline and we'll connect and try to get something set up for you. Have a great week. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Wooden Boat Dan, over and out. God bless.